Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're trying something a little bit new today. We're actually back in the office, so we're sort of excited about that in the midst of COVID. So rather than sitting in opposite offices across the hall from each other and acting like we were in different places, we thought we'd just sort of spend some time together and get to talk to you today about what are the keys to having financial contentment. So I'll introduce us. My name is Josh Arrington. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager here at Archetype. And this is Sarah Bradley, and Sarah is our Senior Client Advisor. Now, those titles may not mean much to you, but one of the things that's really unique about Archetype is the way that we really dive into handling clients and dealing with things. And a lot of places that are wealth managers, the same person does marketing and they do sales and they do client advice and they do investments, and it's the same person trying to do it all. And we're just really the belief that we have strength when we're together, that life is a team sport, and that we all have unique gifts that we bring to the table. And so for us, we've broken those things apart into different teams. We all work together on those. So instead of getting one person, our clients really get a bunch of different people working for them and with them. And so in business development, my team does a lot of initial meetings with people and really is sort of the public face, I guess, out there to people who don't know who we are. And Sarah's team that she leads really focuses on walking with our clients over years and doing the journey with them. And so that's just a little bit about who we are as an organization that you see from the very beginning. We at Archetype have a very simple mission. It's to help families thrive across generations. You see the first half of it there on the screen, but the second half is by matching their money with their purpose. And so we do a different approach than a lot of people. We do multi-generational conversations. I'm old enough, Sarah reminds me all the time, to be her father. So if someone were working with us, we would be having conversations at both levels. And so we'll dive into things because we really want families to have health and healing around their money. We want it, the wealth that you have, however great it is, however small it is, to be something that blesses you and not something that stresses you. And then we believe that part of realizing that it's a blessing then allows you to begin to match your money with your purpose and to give to change the world. This is what we call our four quadrants, and we'll get to sort of the financial planning and contentment piece in a minute. But the four quadrants sort of lays out how we approach working with every one of our clients. And it really is where we find the beginning of having contentment. It goes beyond just handling money. So the very first thing you see on the top left there is that we want to have a really good strategy for people. And we're going to talk a lot about this one today because for us, having a financial plan is ground zero.
Absolutely. It's hard to go forward without that in place.
Without that in. A study by Schwab recently said that less than 1 in 4 people in America, adults, have a written financial plan. And from our background, being both of us at different major wirehouse financial companies, we can assure you that most of those companies, their clients are not getting written financial plans. Yeah. And so we start with that as ground zero, believing that if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to end up where you want to be. And so that's sort of the start of strategy. There are a lot of other parts of strategy over years that come in, but really setting up a financial plan that becomes not only your operational game plan, but also something you can measure and evaluate back to. And after we have that in place, then we move to the bottom left, which is based on what we discovered in that plan. What are your dreams? What are your goals? What are the liabilities you have? What are the resources you have? What are the risk tolerances that you have? What are the changes that you expect in life? And reviews, what are the changes you've experienced in life? Then we move into actually handling the investment side. And so on the investment side, we run several different portfolios that we are able to get clients into, and we manage that side of things for people. And that's where a lot of times you'll see the end of the wealth management discussion. The right-hand side of our four quadrants is where we begin to really even dig deeper into contentment, which we're going to talk about today. And that is diving into family. what are the issues in families that are created and caused by money? And I don't want to steal any of Sarah's thunder. I'll leave her plenty of space, but we just know that a lot of issues around money, which is one of the top 2 reasons for divorce and breakdown in the American family, a lot of times comes to communication. And so we journey with people to help facilitate conversations that are deep and meaningful and impactful, to get them on the same page, to have a better understanding of one another, better understanding of one another's dreams, and better understanding of how together the entire family unit can accomplish those things. And then out of that, we want to flow into our last one, which is legacy. When you have blessing and healing around your wealth, then it's really simple and easy to want to see other people blessed and have healing around their situations as well. So we help people understand how they can give the most efficient and effective way, which is both on the nonprofit side, that we want you to give to places that meet your desires. We're not recommending nonprofits, but we give you some characteristics maybe to look for and where you're giving. But even more so, how can we in the giving help you to cut that wonderful organization called the IRS out of your life? The truth is, in the American system, the tax code is actually really, really beneficial to people who are generous. And so we want to walk that path with people, but we want to do it not only when they pass, which is what a lot of people think when they think of legacy. When I die, what gets left? We want to help people begin to enjoy and be cheerful givers while they're alive, to see the fruit of their philanthropy and their generosity. And we think that that in alone brings contentment. In fact, we know statistically speaking that the more generous people are, the more contentment and happiness they have in life. And so it's not just the financial planning that we're going to talk about a lot today that brings contentment, but it's getting to that end goal that brings contentment of being generous as you move forward in life. And so these things are what we call our 4 quadrants, and they sort of are the pattern that we walk through with different people. And you may be questioning, well, you mentioned financial planning a couple of times, but why is that so important? A study by the American Psychological Association showed that having a good plan significantly reduces the amount of anxiety and stress in a person's life, but it also increases positive emotions. And the slide you're looking at here specifically deals with the study, Sarah, that you were looking at, that is people with 3 million plus in net worth.
Yeah, so there's a survey that's done every year specifically for high net worth investors. So that's considered people who invest at least $3 million of liquid assets. And so this study looks at what matters to those high net worth investors and what's important to them.
And so what you see here is sort of what some of the studies findings were, that in that category, 72% of people wanted to help others through philanthropy. 58% wanted the ability to create economic opportunity for others. Interesting on that, one of our target demographic really is business owners and C-suite kind of people. And 83% of those people were business owners. Man, how true is that in the current environment we're in?
Right.
With everything that's happened with COVID? I have those conversations with prospects and clients and just people in general that they want to get to work, not because they're trying to make something for themselves, but they want to help other people. And so we certainly see that lived out right now. 44% want the ability to change the world. 29% want the thrill of winning. 24% want increase in social status. And what's beautiful to me and to us in looking at is the 3 that are the highest
are external.
are external and the most significant. And so those are big things. And so those are the things people want. But if you don't have a plan, I think naturally we drift to the 2 on the right. That's
actually a really interesting point, because if you aren't intentional, then you end up consuming, I think, which is what increasing your social status and the thrill of winning, that's the competitive spirit that a lot of entrepreneurs carry and a lot of them used to build what they have. And I think the other 3 are more externally focused, but you're right, it's not normal human nature.
My grandmother used to always say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yep.
I think you see here, people have good intentions, but the difference between good intentions and moving forward really moves into having a plan, something that you can rely on. And for some reason, this slide is not wanting to show its picture there. But basically, if you were seeing what we Oh, there you go. Well, you had it all set up.
There you go. Yeah, we had some tech.
So 40% of those people in that same, this is looking at the same study, less than half of these high net worth people have a clearly identified purpose for their wealth.
So they have a vague desire. They want to help others. They want to create opportunity for other people. But that word clearly identified purpose means they've taken it from the intangible, ethereal, gut, heart intention to, but this is how I actually want to see it come to fruition, and I can put language around that that's a little more definitive. So that's what only half of the respondents, well, less than half really, were able to take even that step of defining the vision of where they wanted to go.
And less than half as well have taken the steps.
Actually taken steps, yeah.
When I see that, what comes to mind for me is everyone wants to be content. But how many of us don't even know what it would take for us to be happy? Mm-hmm. And certainly, if we don't know what it would take for us to be happy and content, then there's no, how do you take steps if you don't even know what that is? And so I think a lot of times in financial planning, we do know, I cited the figures earlier, that it brings greater contentment just from reducing anxiety on the financial side, but on the life meaning side, to know that the clients, even people with high net worth, because a lot of times it's easy to think, well, they've got it all figured out. Money does not solve the problems in your world. It's just a big, bright yellow highlighter that highlights those areas. And so what we want to do is journey with people so that their money is that blessing sense for them. And so when someone comes in then and they're going to start this process, there's a sort of a handoff point a lot of times between our departments. Yeah. They're going to start forming a plan up. Sort of talk a little bit, Sarah, about what y'all systemize and look at and do.
What we go through. So what you see on the screen is really just a high level, putting language around some of the steps that most of our clients take. And what I hope, there's two things I really want to highlight. One is your balance sheet. When you're in that high net worth category, it really is a separate business of its own. And I think a lot of the business owners that we work with, they of course spend almost all day, every day, thinking about their business, strategizing about their business, looking for opportunity, communicating, making sure everyone in the business understands the plan and how to best move forward. But then when they go home, it's easy just to kind of hit the easy button and want to tune out. And the reality is, as your net worth grows, it requires the same amount of attention as what you might consider your primary business, the vehicle that you use to create your wealth. And so we work with folks to view their balance sheet and their net worth as a separate entity that you plan for and account for and have vision for. And I think that's the exciting part, is as we go through some of these steps, I really built it to revolve more around questions than information and giving answers. I think that when you give information, it can be more transactional, but at Archetype, we always say we want to be more transformational than we are transactional. And I think the way that we all see transformation in our lives is whenever someone asks us a good question, and when we have positive conversation and sometimes difficult conversation with ourselves, the Lord, and one another. And so on that note, there's kind of 4 key areas we're going to go through in order to move in that direction. The first is to assess the scope, and that's really look at where you are today and where you want to go. That's getting honest with where you are today and setting a vision and a dream for where you're headed. Define the strategy is what it sounds like, is develop a game plan. Every team sport knows that if you don't have a good game plan, then you're hoping and wishing on luck, and we don't think that that's the best strategy. Build the foundation. We're going to talk a little bit about putting together a team. Again, when your balance sheet is a separate business, you likely, as a business owner, you likely have, or even an executive within a business, you have a team that works under you and around you to fill in the holes and the gaps. And we believe the same is for your personal balance sheet. And then implement and thrive. And a big piece that we're going to talk about is communication there at the end. So if we want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, we are.
Sure.
I want to point one thing out here that this is the process, and the process is consistent. When you mentioned asking questions, the process is consistent, but what happens for each individual is consultative. It's different. And so I just throw that out there because I get asked the question all the time, hey, what's a good stock you would recommend?
Yeah.
I mean, that if I could pick all the right stocks, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. I would be managing a huge balance sheet of my own, right? And not that we don't know what's going on in finance, but that answer, we would evaluate stocks. We would evaluate any investment using the same process, but the application of it is different for every individual. And it's the same with planning. The process is going to be the same, but the questions are going to be consultative because you're a unique person. And if the person you're working with or the people you're talking to are doing a one size fits all, it's not going to be comfortable at some point. It may be comfortable at first, but it's either going to shrink or stretch, or something's going to get off in the process there for you.
And before we move forward to the next slide, on that note on the investment piece, I did want to just briefly touch again on, we're going to talk primarily about strategy from our 4 quadrants, a little bit of family and legacy, but mostly strategy today. But on the investment piece, just like you have a strategy, you want to have a game plan for your investments. And so we do have an investment philosophy. We're just not going to cover that in this webinar. So that's why we're not talking about
Welcome to answer questions.
But if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we'll hit them.
All right. First step, assess the scope.
Yes. So the slides are coming in here. So the first step, assess the scope. So this is where we are really defining where we are today, and evidence, not opinion. So you'll notice as we go through each of the 4 steps, I'm listing out a principle. So as a company, we spent some time putting together 12 principles that we believed truly were relevant across time. A principle is like gravity, right? You can disagree with it, but if you test it from a high building, you're going to get hurt. And so we believe that there are principles in place that when you abide by these principles, whenever you align with these principles, it can create contentment, which is what we're talking about today. But it also creates an environment to flourish and to thrive, which is ultimately what we want for our clients. So evidence, not opinion is where we're going to start. I have a Thomas Jefferson quote up there: honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom. So if we go to the next slide, the reason we want to get honest start with honesty, start with evidence, is building your game plan really begins with an honest assessment of where you stand today. So I have a visual up there. It's a phrase we use a lot at Archetype called "there, here, path." So it's pretty straightforward. Where you are today is your here, and where you want to be tomorrow is your there. The path you take in between is your path. And that really sums up what our game plan at a high level is. So we start with defining the here and getting honest about, your budget and your lifestyle, and getting honest about your financial picture. Honestly, I'm using that word a lot, honestly. For a lot of our folks, when they first come, half the battle is there are so many moving pieces to your wealth. And for a lot of our clients, it's not as simple as moving over just a single account and boom, there's all the money. You have money likely in outside investments, real estate, in your business. You have complicated wealth structures that you're navigating and complicated investments. And so we want to make sure we're taking all of those things into consideration and evaluating each piece of the pie and making sure we have a full picture. And that in and of itself is a process, if we're honest. And so the couple of key questions to ask as you're in this phase is exactly that. Where does my balance sheet stand today? Where are your investments and who handles them, and what are all the financial pieces of the puzzle? Which part of your finances causes you stress and keeps you awake at night? I think that's something to key into. Paying attention to where your energy is, and then where your energy definitely is not. One of our other principles at Archetype is keep it simple, steward, rather than the alternative. And we believe simplicity actually has an intangible value. And sometimes taking a more simplistic approach can free up your time to be more intentional in some of those areas we talked at the beginning. Where do you need clarity in order to move forward? I think this is a really important one. There might be pieces of your financial life that you understand, you're very familiar with, you really don't need to spend time on, but there might be aspects that you or your loved ones just need to gain more understanding in order to feel confident about where your money's taking you, because ultimately your money is a tool, and we want to make sure that it's driving forward in a direction that you are telling it to go versus just following along because the complexity is it's just become a beast of its own. So the last question there really goes into the there in the visual, and this is the vision of where you want to go. And I think it just starts with, have you established a vision beyond your immediate needs and goals? I think step one is definitely, okay, what needs to happen in order to take care of your needs, your family's needs, even your goals such as generosity, and starting to put some of those pieces into place. That's a great starting point. But one of my favorite things to do with clients is essentially and literally slide over a blank piece of paper. And something about a blank piece of paper, it kind of wipes everything, and it gives you a fresh chance to look at without the hindrance of all the complexity. Where do you want to go 5 years from now, without having to think about the technical of how you're going to get there? That's our job, that we want to partner with you to help you with. But ultimately, if your money is a tool, what is it accomplishing for you and for your family? Did you have something to add on that one?
This is just step one. And I think about between initial conversations that we have so often with people.
Yeah.
And if we ask, okay, just sort of give us your financial framework, your financial picture.
Sure.
Just even on the finance side, not even getting into purpose and all those things, how it's like an iceberg. We get the tip in that initial conversation, but as you start digging into balance sheet things and other places, there's all this wealth of information that often isn't taken into consideration or thought about.
Yeah.
And yet it affects all of these things, and it affects your goals. And sometimes you think about it when you start thinking about your goals that you weren't thinking about before. It's just interesting how it all works together. It's not a simple process. And while we want to keep things simple, we want to take the time to help people get to that place. And so to have that fully comprehensive picture, it's always interesting to me. The first page ends up being 10 pages by the time you've dug through it a little bit.
Well, and I think another way to say that is there are layers, right? And so you begin with consolidating and getting an understanding, and then you move to your immediate needs and goals. And then depending on how you're wired, maybe you start with vision, but there's layers to building this. And that's part of the process is opening up those.
Write that down. There are layers. She said it much better than I do. Again, that'll happen more.
So if we click forward one more. So once you have an understanding of where you are today and where you're headed, you have an intentionality about where you want to go. The next step is to document the plan. I wasn't able to find the source for this quote, but we say it all the time. If it's not written down, it did not happen. If we want to go to the next slide. So again, this is defining the path, and this is where we really get into the weeds of what technical gears need to turn in order to move you forward in the strategy piece, and we want to make sure we're turning them and implementing them in a way that aligns with your values, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But a lot of times people have the plan, it's just right here. And it's in their mind and they're holding it, and maybe they've even communicated it to a spouse, a loved one, or a trusted advisor. But there's something tangible about writing it down and seeing it on paper. All the time when I run financial plans with our clients, the first plan, I always call it a rough draft, no matter how much information I'm given, because inevitably as they look at the plan externally on a piece of paper or virtually, they think of other pieces or other desires they have, and it stirs excellent conversation, which is one of the reasons I love the financial planning process. So if we look at defining the strategy, some key questions to ask, I think it starts with who. Who do you need around you to define and execute your strategy? Again, this goes back to in your business and when you created wealth, you probably didn't do it all on your own. And I would wager that no one on this webinar did it all on their own. You had advisors around you, you had confidants and friends to cheer you on, and then you might have had employees or an executive team to surround you. And so when we look at who do you need to define and execute a strategy for your personal balance sheet, again, that is its own separate entity in business now. I think the same question is relevant. And we're going to talk about at the end who needs to be involved in that. The second Oh, sorry. I thought we
No,
were
you're
recording.
good.
All right. Working out the tech here. The second question I think is the most important on this slide, and it's what do I value? I put a qualify on there, value most, but what do I value? And the reason we want to start with this is it goes a little bit back to the 4 quadrants. We want you to have vision, and I think having vision is important for moving forward. But aligning that vision and your values creates something that it's beyond just transacting with your money, and it's pulling back and thinking about what has most impacted you and how you want to leave a mark, both while you're living and after your money, because money will probably outlive you after you're gone. And when you start from that place, all the other pieces fall into line. You know, you've heard the analogy of if you get the rocks in first, all the sand will fill in and you can fill the jar. But if you start with the sand, all of a sudden the rocks don't fit. And at Archetype, we believe those rocks really are your values and what matters to you, and then how you build your vision and your plan around those values. And so we take that very seriously. That's why I wanted to slow down a little bit. We have a whole process, again, that we're not going to get into, that we walk through our clients, with our clients, to help them, you know, think about their narrative and articulate a blessing to those whom they love and want to leave their money to, even if it's an entity, and then think about their values. And so we do take that seriously here as a company. And then the last 2 questions, who are you planning for? I think that it falls in naturally with the values conversation. Are you hoping to leave your money to your kids? Are you hoping to leave your money to a charity? Are you wanting to bounce the last check? There's a lot of questions to ask as your money grows beyond your needs for retirement and for your life here on earth. There's a lot of ways it can work to continue a legacy long after you're gone, and we love that conversation as well. And so that really comes to the last question. Do you desire to plan beyond your lifetime and for the next generation, whether that's your kids or other loved ones, family members, or even charitable and philanthropic endeavors? If you want to bounce the last check, we can help you do that. And if you want to plan beyond the 200-year family, if you want to think about that, or 300-year legacy, we can help you do that too. So these are all important questions to slow down and consider as you define your strategy with the team. So if we want to go to...
And again, the spectrum of answers to those is
yeah.
very broad. So whatever your thoughts are, you're not alone, and you don't have to be with everyone else. It's very normal to have a spectrum on that. So the next part is life's a team sport.
Did you want to talk some about this one?
I love life as a team sport. It has team in the word, it has sport in the word. Those are all things that I love. The African proverb, if you want to go fast, go long, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so we internally operate as a team. We presented a little bit of that at the beginning. Sarah doing client advice, my team doing business development. We have an investment counselor doing investments. And so we split that up. We think everyone benefits from that. We get greater joy, but we also provide a much higher quality of service and product to our clients. But there's also team outside of just what we do internally. And we want to be on a team with the people that we work with. In fact, we're true fiduciaries. That's a word you're hearing a lot lately in the market. A lot of people don't realize there are a lot of financial advisors out there who are really good people. We're not here to knock anyone, but by definition, they're not a true fiduciary. Legally, yes. If you, in fact, in a lot of companies, they're an agent of that company legally. And as such, their parameter is that they can't do anything that's not suitable for the client. But that's a pretty broad range of what's suitable and not suitable. And being an RIA only, being on the advisor side, being a true fiduciary. So we're legally responsible to act in the best interest of our clients. And so that's a step of us then being on a team with you. We're together on this. We're on the same side of the table, so to speak, but also then with the other people that are important in getting your finances where you want to go. So these are issues that are going to affect the foundation of your plan, your taxes, your estate plan, your financial plan, your investment management. And you're going to have different people, CPAs, estate plan attorneys, financial planners, wealth managers. There's more. We could throw others up here that sometimes the more complex an estate gets, the more wealth people tend to accumulate, the more complex that balance sheet gets. There's typically tends to be other people. And yet we see a lot of times them operate very independently. And so, or even with competition between goals. So financial plans, part of what they do is bring your whole team together because you've been a part of writing your financial plan. You know it's the path that you need to be on. And now that plan becomes the marching orders, so to speak, for the CPA, for the estate planning attorney. It defines what they need to be doing. And so we love that we're a piece of that. And we then want to work with those people. We have numerous examples that we could give and anecdotes forever. I love to tell stories. But where we have conversations directly with the attorneys. We have conversations directly with the CPAs. And then we become what we are is the person who coordinates that communication between each team member to make sure that not it's done the way that we want it done or the way the estate lawyer wants it done or the CPA wants it done, but it's done the way that the plan that you've been a part of creating gets accomplished in the best possible manner. And so when we do that, we go further and it stays on course throughout that. So yeah, that is one of my favorites. I'll kick it back over to you for the next one.
So the last step is implementation. And so you've kind of defined where you are, where you want to go, how you want to get there, and who you want around you. And so the last principle is don't quit. And I love this principle. It has a lot of implications. I think the most relevant is we have a lot of short-term volatility in the markets right now and a lot of uncertainty in our economy. We'll just leave it at the money for the time being. And when you have a plan in place and you've in the calm of day decided how you want to move forward, not quitting and not changing course in the midst of the storm, keeping your lighthouse steady so that you can make it through the storm is something we think is very important. So the quote there says, to be prepared is half the victory. And I think if we go to the next slide, the other half of the victory is sticking to it and communicating. I'm just making that part. That's Sarah Bradley's opinion. But if being prepared is the first half, then sticking to it and communicating it is the second half. And so the quote, I want to start at the bottom there. It says, plans that aren't communicated are not plans at all. That's a yours truly Archetype quote. And so it's great. I think the first step, if you've written it all down, but then to communicate it moving forward is when, first of all, there's some accountability. You let other people, trusted people in, but then you also are making sure, because you are part of a team, whether you're married and it's your spouse, or whether you're working with family members to help give to them generously or incorporate them, or whether you are working with an entity, a philanthropic entity, communicating with the appropriate people is an important part of implementation. And so the key questions, who in your life needs to know the overview of your plan? For business owners especially, when we have a whole separate webinar for this, but succession planning. And
next week.
There you go. Next week, impromptu plug. And so who in your business needs to know your succession plan? Maybe not your personal financial plan, but your succession plan. When it comes to your personal financial plan, who do you trust with the more intricate details? And so, we all have circles of trust, and there's certain individuals that maybe we just want them to know, hey, if something happens to me, here's the people you call, or this is how things work high level. But then who do you have in your life that really gets into the nitty gritty with you, not only to help you make wise decisions, but also for accountability and the sake of honesty. And then the third question, have you communicated recently with these people? So I think a point we were talking about earlier is plans, they shift and change with time. And whether it's because you have new goals and desires, or you've accomplished old goals, or maybe you had unexpected wealth come your way, or maybe you want to increase your generosity. There's a lot of reasons to revisit your plan. And over the course of several years or a decade, your plan might shift considerably. And so staying in constant communication with those people, I think, is an important part.
Yeah, we already have the question, And by the way, if you have a question, feel free to click on that and send in a question. We have a few minutes here for question and answers, but this just ties right into it. How often should they be reviewing their plans? That's one of the questions.
Yeah. We recommend yearly, unless as you get closer to major transitions, retirement, preparing to launch a business, preparing to sell a business, marriage. Those major transition points, we have folks who look at their plan monthly or as new deal offers come to the table. I have a client who's selling a practice, and pretty much every month he would get new numbers, and I'd run a new plan for him and evaluating that. But for most of our folks, just an annual update gives you that chance to get on the same page again with those key people in your life, and also reassess what was important to you last year. Is that still important to you? Or maybe something has caused you to shift, and maybe you have a realignment with where you want to go. And so both of those things are important.
Excellent. And then the last one?
So the last question there, have I considered and evaluated their input? And one of the reasons I put this in there, when we look at succession planning with kids especially, or businesses, passing it down, if it's not to your children, to the next generation of people who are going to raise up the business. It's easy to want to dictate down, right? Because you created the wealth, and so it's easy to want to dictate to that next generation or to that philanthropy or whatever the case might be, your expectations for how it's to be run or spent. And we think that there's a conversation to be had about the value perhaps of including the next generation, whether it's of your business that you're going to allow to take over the business, of the charitable organization you're working with, or of your family, and evaluating and considering their input and beginning to engage them in conversation. And so again, we could have a whole webinar on that one bullet point. So this is a teaser, but I'm trying to highlight key conversations, because again, we believe that transformation comes whenever you start to have those critical conversations, and those oftentimes are birthed out of key questions. So
critical communication.
Yeah.
I've very seldom have seen, we call it trying to control from beyond the grave, right?
Yeah.
I seldom have seen people who wanted to do that truly didn't have good intentions, right? They know they worked so hard to get there. They didn't want to see it go away. They know the weaknesses of their children, whatever that is. It's typically driven by good intentions. But I've also never seen it done where it didn't tarnish legacy. I've never seen controlling from beyond the grave enhance legacy.
Yeah.
And so really the exact same actions can happen sometimes, but the fact that there's conversation and buy-in can really shift how that plays out for you. So,
and this is a bit of a rabbit trail, but I had someone pose this question to me, and I thought it was a well-spoken question. When documenting an estate plan and considering, especially with trusts, the parameters and the boundaries, considering with each parameter that you place, is this parameter being placed in faith and love? In other words, that you have faith in the person receiving or the entity receiving, that they will be good stewards, and that you are lovingly giving this money as a gift, meaning they have the choice to not be a good steward? Or is it rooted in fear and control, which would be controlling from the grave, or the fear that the person receiving isn't going to use it wisely, and making sure each parameter in your estate plan and in that trust is rooted in faith and love, versus the other two. Sometimes even just asking that question can help avoid good intentions with negative results. So just food for thought, a little bit of a side trail.
Great. Well, I'm thrilled Sarah's here with us. So you have the opportunity, if you want to ask questions, we're going to open it up for questions. You have a little Q&A button there. If you'll just click on the Q&A, please feel free to send us a question. We've already answered one question. Another question that we have is, how long does this process take? And when should I have started?
Right.
So
that's a good
I'll let you, those are two good questions.
Yeah.
When should you have started? Right about walking time.
Yeah. Right. When's the best time to plant a tree, right?
Right.
How are we doing on time, by the way?
We're good. We
We're
got 10,
good.
15
Okay,
minutes.
perfect. So how long does the process take? And I think this goes back to what we talked about with layers. I think each layer is a revisiting. You can think of the process as a cycle, and so you're going to go through cyclically as you uncover each layer. And so I, typically give a year for the first layer of, okay, getting an understanding of all the pieces, building a good game plan, and putting it in place in a way that, it covers the technical. Another year could be really having some honest conversations about what you value and your vision beyond your immediate goals. And so I think sometimes the element of time, I like to think about climbing a mountain. If you've ever talked to people who have climbed Everest or done research or read books, you have to acclimate at a base camp. And so they take territory a level at a time, but then there's acclimation points as they climb. And the same is true as you move through the planning process, because again, we don't operate in silos. And so whether it's communicating with your investment team and your CPA and your lawyer, keeping them all on the same page, which is what we like to help out with. If it's communicating with family members, loved ones, and philanthropic entities, there's the period of time in between where people have to coordinate and acclimate and soak in everything, all the shifts that are taking place. And sometimes it goes slower than what people hope when we account for that.
Okay, we have one here on tax management for high W-2 owners with limited tax advantages is key. What specific options do we offer for tax optimization, excluding tax harvesting and philanthropic giving?
That's a very specific question. So it sounds like there's a conversation.
There's a conversation.
There's a conversation to be had, and I wish that we could have a dialogue about that with limited tax advantages. Yes, and so I think you hit on two of the big ones. Obviously, the tax loss harvesting is something we do for our clients at the end of every year. And then the philanthropic giving. It's interesting that you wanted to exclude that one, so I take it that you're familiar with those strategies around donor advised funds, especially. Okay, good. Just said yes. Thank you. So the other advantages, that's one where we like to coordinate with CPAs. And so that's a big thing that we want to work with folks on, is making sure there's excellent communication with a CPA and us as your advisor and the estate attorney, to make sure that we are staying in our lane, but also coordinating to make sure the way we move your investments and plan for your strategy is conducive to the management of taxes. And so when
I'll just say there are that team life is a team sport thing is such a huge thing for us, and because of that, we have a network that's really not even confined by geography. That if it's not something we specifically do, we will, because it's a team sport, we will help you get to that person. Just this week, just yesterday actually, we had a tax question that we could not find a lawyer or a CPA in the entire city of Houston, which is a really big city, who could answer that question. And by the end of the day, we had the question answered, we had it signed, we had everything taken care of, because that's just the network that consultative approach has allowed for us. So,
and
go ahead.
I think another piece that's not in the two groups that you hit on is retirement planning, in terms of looking at tax favored investment accounts. Obviously, W-2, so you're probably maxing out your 401k if you're asking this question, and looking at different ways to pull money through retirement. So again, it's difficult without knowing your situation. We work with an individual who, working with an organization specifically to his industry, that allows to reorient some of their income in order to put it in a tax advantaged vehicle. But it's a very specific situation. But retirement accounts are another of the kind of the big broad overview that you could look at.
I love the question because I love it specific. To answer it fully and effectively, we'd love to have a 10, 15-minute conversation with you and just really find out what are the circumstances that you're facing. And I know you said excluding philanthropic gifting, but I'm going to take advantage of the question being asked to throw this out as well, that that even changes. And so this year in particular, with the COVID and the CARES Act, a lot of people aren't aware that hole is even more open than usual, because If you are a person who maximizes your giving there, you can typically give 50% of adjusted gross income for tax purposes in a year. But with the CARES Act this year, you can give 100% of adjusted gross income. So that even changes in the moment. If you're a corporation official or owner or president, typically you're limited to 10% that you can give of the income of the company to charitable reasons for tax purposes. And this year you can give 25%. So even in excluding things, we want you to know those things are constantly shifting. And so having someone on your team who's looking out for that is really hugely important as well. Let's see if we have any other questions. I had a thought while you were talking earlier as well. By the way, if you have a question, please feel free to drop it in. I had a thought while you were talking earlier about sort of the process and it being an ongoing process. This morning, I found out that a guy that many people will know who's been a major influence in my life, Ravi Zachariah, passed away. And he wrote a book called Walking from East to West. And I was thinking, for some reason, you were talking about that. I guess maybe just because he's on my mind, that really this financial planning is like that. It's a walk from east to west. Do you ever really arrive? No, you're just always walking from east to west. And when you get back where you were, you're still walking from east to west, right? You just never get there. And so there's this ongoing journey side of things that I think is so incredibly important. Well, we seem like we've answered the 3 or 4 questions that we've had. We certainly do not want to waste any of your time by any stretch of the imagination. And so if you have further questions, please feel free to let us know. We want to thank you for tuning in. If you want more information on charitable giving or financial markets, retirement accounts, planning, legacy, business transition, there's a whole list of things there. Not only would we love to talk with you about that, but we also have webinars that come up at different times on those. My contact information is on there, so I'm sort of just playing the doorway. If Sarah's who you need to talk to, I'll kick you to Sarah. If it's somebody else on our team that you need to talk to, we'll get you in touch with them. But I would love to answer any questions that I can answer. If not, get you the right people. We really want to point out to you the one above that. Do you need prayer and encouragement? And we just know that this is a trying time in the life of many people. We certainly don't want to make anyone feel awkward. We don't know where you're at faith-wise, but we want you to know that regardless of where you are faith-wise, you're cared about, you matter, you're significant. And offering to pray for you is not a sign of disrespect. It's a sign of care and concern based on our beliefs of who we are. And so if there's anything that we can encourage you in or any way that we can pray for you, we literally have people who are doing that constantly. And we want to lift you up in that way as you walk through this time. Absolutely want to be sure that we continue to do that for our nation, our leaders in this time of division, standing on the promises of blessing that God has given us to live life and to live life abundantly in the future. So thanks so much for joining us. If there's any questions we can answer for you, please feel free to reach out. Hope you have an excellent day. Hope you're able to get out of the house a little bit. Find a place where you can walk in the air without a mask on and do the things that you need to do. God bless. Have a great day.
Thank you.